Yeah. Me.
How does this work? Here? Okay.
Higher up, so it's closer to.
Yeah. All right, hi everyone. We're going to move on with the second half of our HTML and CSS lecture. And we're going to be doing our first workshop. So yeah, this isn't a lecture, so you guys will actually be working alongside us. And yeah, by the end of today, you'll be having your own Capbook profile. Yeah, and Capbook, I think Lucas previously mentioned, this is like a watered down version of Facebook. And we'll be basically building this up over the next couple days. Okay, but before we start, let's first go over a few important links as well. So if you ever need help from the staff, go to weblab.mit/q, and if you have any questions, just go to this to write down any questions you have. Okay, so for today, you guys will be using VS Code and Terminal. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to set this up. Oh, yeah, I will set it up on my screen as well, on the sides. For the people on Zoom, you guys can toggle between the two shared screens. And oh, yeah. Wait, can't hear? On Zoom? Oh, shoot. All right, sorry guys, on Zoom. Basically, we're going to do a workshop today, and we're going to be building a profile page for our Capbook app. So for today, we're going to first start with opening up VS Code and Terminal. For the people on Zoom, you guys can toggle between the two shared screens. One screen will be the slides, the other screen would be the code. So if you guys can see on the side, here will be the code. So yeah, so for everyone here, we're going to first start by opening console. So so at the bottom, I'm going to open a terminal. So you can create a terminal at the bottom. Okay. So you guys can work from any folder you guys want. I'm going to work from desktop. So right now I'm in a desktop folder, but you guys can choose whatever folder you want. You can also make your own folder. And once you do that, we'll move on with cloning our repository. So you guys can open up weblab.is/catbook. This will be our repository of all our workshops. And underneath this web page, you guys can clone the GitHub by pressing this green button and copying this link here. Yeah, so I will do it on this side as well. So once you copy the link, you guys can clone it by entering this command, which is git clone and this git link. And once you do that, you'll be presented with the entire server code basically into this folder. So like once you ls after doing this, you'll see this Capbook React folder inside. And now to enter this repository, you just have to cd this folder. All right. Okay, now we're going to move on and switch to the right branch. So currently we're on the main branch, but we want to check out the Workshop 0 starter code. So if you check out the website, you can actually see that we have a lot of branches. So each branch is essentially like a step in our workshops. But for today, we're going to be using every workshop that starts with W0. So for everyone here, you guys can check out the right branch by typing it git checkout W0 / step 0. Or sorry, starter. W0 - starter. Okay, now we're going to open this workshop on VS Code. So if you guys haven't, you guys can open a new window. Here you can basically you can open your workshop by pressing the open link and opening within desktop your repository. Yeah. Before we move on with the actual code, we're going to first install a few extensions. And we're going to install Prettier, which is a VS Code extension that formats our code really nicely. So underneath extensions, which is on the left sidebar, you can search up Prettier. And here you can basically install this extension by there should be a button that says install. So you guys click that, it'll install this extension for you guys. And once we do so, we're going to set this Prettier formatter as our default formatter. So underneath settings, we can set this formatter as our default by searching up formatter. And underneath editor and default formatter, you can click this drop down and you should select the one that says Prettier. Okay, is everyone good? Okay. Now we'll move on and also set our default formatter we'll also save our formatter. So whenever we save, this will also format our code. So in settings, we can also search up format on save. And we want to enable this property. And once doing this, if you check back on your files, whenever we modify like our HTML file and make something like unaligned, so for example, if I just make random indentations.
You might want to be a little bit louder.
Okay. If you save, you'll see that it will automatically format for you guys. So yeah, if you look from here, anytime you save your code, it'll go from something like this to this. And that looks a lot nicer. All right, now we'll actually look at the actual code. So to do so, we're going to drag our index.html file into our browser. So to do so, we'll open a browser page up, and we're going to drag the file into this browser. So within Finder, you should be able to find your file, and there should be an index.html file here. And you can drag it in by just dragging it over into the browser. And once doing so, you'll be presented with this Hello World page. All right, so for the goal for today, we're going to try to modify our profile page to look something like here in the middle. So currently we just have Hello World, and we're going to make the necessary HTML and CSS modifications to get to this. So yeah, we'll begin now. And yeah, this will be a few steps. So yeah, you guys should buckle up and get ready for this. So to start off, we're first going to check out Workshop 0/Starter if you haven't already. And here, our first exercise, we're going to work on the actual HTML content. So for this exercise, the goal is to create like an About Me section. And there should be a description about ourselves and like a fun fact. And for some hints, you guys can use like these HTML tags, H1 tags, P tags, and div tags. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to work on this, and we'll check back in. All right, we'll give you guys 2 minutes. If you guys have any questions, the staff will be walking around the classroom, and they can answer any questions you have. Yes? Oh, okay, yeah. Raymond, you can stay. Okay, if you guys haven't finished, it's perfectly fine. We'll walk through this together. And yeah, we're going to start by making our title for this page. So I'm going to follow this content right behind me, but you guys are not required to write the exact same text. But yeah, to start off, Buka Buka will be a header tag. And we're going to use the H1 tag because it's like a title. So to start off, I'll create a H1 element. And inside, we do this inside body so that it will show up inside our web page. So just by typing Buka Buka inside your H1 tag, if you just reload your page on index.html, you'll be presented with your updated Buka Buka web page. Next, we're going to create this horizontal line underneath our title. And a useful tag is the HR tag. And this HR tag is essentially a horizontal line break. You can write it like this if you want, but you don't have. There's not any content you have to put inside the HR tag. So you can actually make this self-enclosing, and you can do so just by adding a backslash right before your closing. So this will do the same thing, and you'll have this tag or this horizontal line underneath Buka Buka. Okay, now we're going to create the two sections underneath. So So if you guys can see, we're going to create two sections, one that's about myself and one that's about a fun fact about me. So for each of these, we're going to create a section element, and we create sections because it's nicer to format. So within each section, we'll have these two lines, and basically we have like this about me section, and then we'll have like a fun fact section. So here, this about me is also a header tag because it's bolded. So we can use, for today, we'll use an H4 tag. And we can just type in the content inside. Okay, so with this, if you just reload the page, you'll be presented with something that looks pretty similar to what's behind me. Okay. You can also do the same thing for the other section, but for time, we'll just move on. All right. So that wraps up our first exercise, and now we're going to check out step 1. So we're going to run these two commands, which is reset hard and git checkout workshop 0-step 1. For a brief git clarification or overview, we're going to use these two commands a lot throughout our workshops, but the reason we do this is because this enables us to switch between steps very easily. So more specifically, for git reset hard or -- hard, this command basically resets your local version of your code to match the most recently committed version of your code. So this will irreversibly delete all local uncommitted changes. So you should use this sparingly whenever you're writing code, because once you run this command, your recent code will never come back. So why we do this is because whenever we take code from GitHub, and after many minutes of coding up and making changes, we might get to a point where our code is really messy or just very confusing. And you want to get to an original working version of this code, but you also don't want to click undo 10,000 times. So an easier way to do this is just git reset hard, because it always just matches your last commit. And now everyone's happy, just like this guy. The other command is git checkout your branch, and this will retrieve the branch from the cloud, which will be from GitHub. And yeah, so for our workshops throughout these next 2 weeks, if you ever get lost or fall behind, these two commands are very useful. So make sure to run these when you're toggling between different steps. And also a quick note, we use these for workshops, but you guys should not use this when building your own projects. Git reset hard is destructive, so that means that once you run this command, you can't recover your code. So a better way to collaborate between different individuals is to just switch and make branches. All right, so now we're going to git reset -- hard and check out workshop 0-step 1. All right, so now for step 1, we're going to create an image. And if you haven't already, just check out workshop 0-step 1. And now for this exercise, the goal is to add a profile picture with an alt text to index.html. I'll give you guys 2 minutes to work on this, and yeah, we'll check back in right after. All right, we're going to start on this, and to do so, we're going to insert an image tag under our index.html. So at the top of our body, we can insert an image tag. And if you remembered, an image tag is self-enclosing. So within this element, we can just self-enclose it by writing a backslash at the end. Now we have to write the right attributes for this image. And as Raymond previously mentioned, there's two, which is source and alt. So now we just have to label these with the right values. For the source attribute, this will get the path from our root of our library, or of our workshop. So currently we're at the root, and our image is cat.png. So to get to this image, all we have to do is just write the path from this root, which would just be this cat.png link. And now we also want to write an alt tab, and this alt is useful because whenever an image suddenly doesn't load, this will be fallback, and this is important just for having clean code. So for alt, we'll just write turtle because this image is a turtle. So yeah, if I reload, you see that we have a turtle now. And for example, if I make a modification accidentally, like an extra T or something, it will fall back to this turtle here. All right. So now we're going to move on and center our HTML. So git reset -- hard and check out workshop 0 - step 2. All right, so for the goal of this step, we're going to try to center the HTML. But to do so, we need to style it by attaching our CSS file. So to connect our styles.css file with our index.html file, we have to link it inside our head element. So here, we want to create this link tag, and we want to link it with the right attributes. So the relationship between the two files is that the styles.css is a style sheet. So we can just we can label the rel tag attribute with style sheet. And now for the actual path, we use href, and this path will also be from the root of the folder, which will just be styles.css. All right. So this won't actually make any changes yet, but once we make modifications within our CSS file, this will enable us to actually see these CSS changes within our actual page. So I'm going to now work on the CSS side. So for the CSS side, we're going to work on centering the text. So we're going to create a utility class specific for this. Right now, we're going to center the title. So let's define a utility class that is as such. So we're going to do a period and then follow it with the class name. So here we'll use u-textCenter. And for this class, we're going to center the text. So we'll use this assignment. Yeah, and we call these kinds of classes that apply to just one CSS attribute a utility class. So we label this with a class, or yeah, we format in our workshops, starting it with a u dash, which signifies that it's a utility class. And whenever we call it in our HTML file, we start it with a class attribute. So when we're trying to center the title, which is Booga Booga, we can, underneath the header, h1 tag, we can define a class attribute, and then now we just label it what we labeled it here, so we can copy this over. So yeah, I labeled the class exactly what the CSS labeled it as. So now once you reload the page, Booga Booga will be centered. All right. Now we're going to create the centerpiece. So let's reset hard and check out step 3. And for this exercise, the goal is to use our utility class and center the other 2 text underneath. So we want to change from these 2 sections from being left aligned to be centered. So I'll give you guys a minute to work on this. Okay, so to center our text, we're just going to do similar. We're going to center the sections like how we did it with our header tag. So basically, all we have to do is for this attribute here, we enter this class attribute underneath the 2 sections as well. So we can place it here and here. And since we place it within the section tag, everything inside will inherit this assignment. So this text align center will center everything inside. So the header, the h4 tag will be centered, and this text will also be centered. So if you reload, you'll see that both sections are now tied, are both centered. Yes, a quick review. All we did was label the class attribute to have this u-text center. And yeah, essentially everything inside now has inherent this attribute. So that's why everything inside is centered. All right, for our next step, we're going to import a font to use for our entire website. So yeah, reset hard and check out workshop 0-step 4. All right, so for this, we're going to now change the font of our text. And to do so, we're going to use fonts.google.com. And yeah, fonts.google.com is a Google library that stores a lot of the fonts that we can use. And you can import it pretty easily. And to do so, we first have to choose the font that we want. So for today, we're going to use Open Sans. So underneath the search bar, you can search up for Open Sans, and you can select this font. Once you select this font, you can get the font just by clicking this button here. And to import it into our CSS file, we will get the embedded code. And I'll zoom in real quick. We're going to click this import button. And we're going to copy over this import line. Okay. to apply this, we're going to enter this inside our styles.css file. So here, we're going to import it just by pasting it. And once we paste it, we just need to now set this font into our entire text body. So to do so, we're going to apply this font into our body section. So if you see, we have this body element that surrounds our entire page. So now we're just going to label this body class with the font. So we want this font to be Open Sans. So to do so, we just label font family as Open Sans. Like that. And if you just reload, you'll see the font will change. Also, on the slides, you see that they actually have a backup, and because sometimes fonts, their libraries might change over time, so a good backup to use is just sans serif. So you can just type in sans serif after your Open Sans, and for example, if I mistype again, this will default back to the sans serif library. Okay. Now we're going to move on with the next step, which is to add a nav bar. So check out step 5. So reset hard and check out workshop 0, step 5. And for this exercise, the goal is to create a nav bar at the top of our body element. So yeah, I'll give you guys, actually no, I will do this with you guys. So at the top of our body tag element, we're going to enter a nav element. And inside our nav element, we're going to create a header tag that says cat book. So we're going to label a h1 tag, and we're going to have the text inside say cat book. So right now you should see when you reload, you'll see this cat book text that appear at the top. But we want to style this title. So to do so, we'll be adding a few attributes. So let's define a few colors first before we do so. So CSS has these variables called CSS variables that can be defined and be used throughout the entire file. And we're going to define these colors in our root or :root class. And you can think of the :root class as like the global config file for the entire CSS page. So you can define any variables inside this class, and they can be used throughout. So here I'm going to label these 3 colors. So today we're going to be using these selections. So yeah, so once you do so, these elements are now defined for you to use whenever you want. And yeah, these variables, you should always have it begin with these 2 hyphens, and that tells CSS that this element is a variable to use. All right, so now we're going to apply these variables onto our actual CSS code. So we're going to modify our title to be blue and have font size 20. So first, we need to create a class for this. So let's define a nav title class and label it inside our nav title. So underneath our nav h1 tag, we're going to create an attribute class and define it as nav title. And now we can call this nav title whenever we want, just by starting a class that starts with nav title with a period. And you can define whatever CSS modifications you want. For this, I'm going to label this color as the blue color, which would be variable primary. So here, to call this primary color, all I have to do is wrap this label with a var enclosing tag, and now this will basically call the color. And for font, I'll just set the size to be 20 pixels. And now when we reload, you'll see that the text will change and the color will be primary. You guys can also try to change the color in root if you guys want, and you guys can make any color modifications. But yeah, we're going to move on with the next step, which is to style our navbar. So yeah, reset hard and check out workshop 0 step 6. Okay, so for this exercise, the goal is to modify our navbar to have a blue background and our text to be white instead of what we have right now. So yeah, I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to work on this. And yeah, as a hint, you guys might have to create a new container class for the navbar. All right, we're going to move on and work through this together. So to do so, we're going to first create a class attribute for our nav container. So here, our nav element, we want to create an attribute class. So we're going to label a class and define it as a nav container. And we're doing this because we want the entire container to be colored. So now when we call this nav container in our CSS file, we can set the background color to be primary. So to do so, we just type in background color and set that to be the variable that is primary. And now that the background's primary, we want to make sure that the text is visible. So we also have to change the actual color of our text. So from primary, we're going to change it to be white. And if you reload, you'll see that now the header has a background of blue and the text is white. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a quick break. So stand up and stretch if you guys want, and we'll check back in like a minute or like 2 minutes, I guess. All right, we're going to get back. Before we start, quick question: is the pace currently like too fast or like too slow, or is it just right? Like thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, let me know if like I should like be faster or slower. Thumbs up if it's too slow. Actually, wait. Thumbs up if it's good. Thumbs down if it's not good. And then we'll have another question.
Fast, slow, good.
Oh wait, what?
Fast.
Oh wait, yeah, okay.
Good.
Yeah, thumbs up if it's too fast, middle if it's like good, and thumbs down if it's too slow. Okay, sounds good. All right, now for our next step, we're going to move on, and the goal for this step is to remove our margins. So let's check out step 7. So reset hard and check out workshop 0, step 7. Okay, so for this step, we're going to work on removing this margin that's currently around our body text. So if you like zoom in, you'll see that we just like this small white margin that's still present, and we want to get rid of that because it's kind of ugly. So yeah, so the goal for this exercise is to get rid of this margin, and also make the spacing of catbook look nicer inside the header or inside our nav bar. So yeah, we first need to figure out where this is coming from. So to start off, we're going to first inspect our website. So to do so, we're going to right-click and press Inspect. So now, once you inspect your element of this web page, you'll be presented with this right sidebar with content about your web page. So underneath the element selection, you'll be presented with these two, this like HTML page and this styles.css page. Let me zoom in. So if you like see here, whenever you select a HTML element, the styles.css will go to the one that's assigned to that. So, for example, if I want to check out like this section, I can see like what CSS is applied onto this section. But yeah, we want to get rid of this margin. So we're going to first click on the entire body element, which is this here. And once you select this, you'll see that on the styles.css, you're presented with this like ordering or box. And you see that underneath margin, we have this value of 8. So yeah, the goal is to get rid of this margin. But first, let's talk about this box model. And the box model is essentially a hierarchy of spacing inside our text, for our text. And when we think about margin, we basically have it, we define it as like the spacing around our container. So like currently the border is like the line that differentiates our container from the surrounding. But the margin is basically like the empty area that's around that border. So with the margin, this will always be transparent. And whenever you have it as a non-zero value, it will always basically be white. Yeah, and for the margins, we're going to work on changing it to be 0. But first, let's talk about ordering. And ordering is a property of some CSS attributes, which can take multiple values. So for today, we're going to talk about margins and padding. When we have margin, we can actually define multiple terms to be assigned to this value. Right now, margin is assigned only to 10 pixels. But if you want to modify and like customize it to be that the top and bottom have 10 pixels, the left and right have 20 pixels of margins, you can insert 2 values, and it will go in a clockwise motion. With 3 values, it's a bit different. It will first go in a clockwise motion again, the top, then left, then bottom. But then the leftmost element will inherit the value from the rightmost. And this happens because they're like opposite of each other. And finally, you can also set 4 values, and you can customize it so that each side have different margins. All right, now we're going to work on getting rid of this margin that we have on our body element. So to do so, underneath our body class, we're going to set the margin to be 0. So here we can just set margin and set the value of that to be 0. And now if you reload, the margin will now be 0, and surrounding the entire body, there's no margins. So now it's like nicely next to the edge. All right, now we're going to talk about padding. And padding is basically the area that's like around the content but inside the border. The difference with padding is that this padding will be affected by like the background color. So if the container has like a color, the padding will take on that color that's assigned by the container. So the goal for our navbar is to have some padding around our text, because currently our text is a little too close to the sides. So yeah, to do so, we're going to first talk about some important system called the grid system. And this is because there's some conventions that we must follow. And with the grid system, which is called the 8-point grid system, we define every variable to have a multiple of 8. And we do this because we want to have some type of order throughout our entire file. And we don't want to have like random values that are assigned throughout our file. So we use 8 as convention. So we're going to assign a few variables inside our root class. And here we're going to use these elements later on. So I'm going to define these 4 variables. So these will all be basically multiples of 8 with 1/2 of 8 as like a small element. All right. Now we're going to use this and apply the padding onto our title, but we also want to use these variables. So underneath our nav container, we can add some padding, and we define the padding as such here on the slide. So we're going to have the top and bottom to have a padding of 8 pixels. So we're going to first set the first element to be small, and then for the left and right, we're going to define it to be a padding of size 16 pixels. Something like this. And now once we reload, you'll see that the padding changes the size of the nav bar. And if you click on the actual nav container, you'll see that the padding reflects what we defined inside our root. All right. If you also want to modify like the actual size of your content, you can also assign like your width and height to have different pixels. But anyways, we're going to move on with the next exercise, which is to be rounding corners. So check out step 8. So reset hard and check out workshop 0 step 8. The goal of this step is to make the image have a rounded corners. Okay, so to make the corners of this image round, we're going to first talk about border radius, which is a assignment that you can assign to your images. So when you label it as like some pixel value, you basically have some curvature that's going to follow this pixel circle, a circle with this pixel in radius size. So if you have like 50 pixels, it'll create a circle of 50 pixels. And that curvature will be used. So so to do so, we're going to do that by rounding the corners on our image. So here, underneath our image, we can also define a class attribute. And we're going to define it as avatar. So now when we call avatar in our CSS file, we can use the border radius. So for convention, we're also going to use our variables that we defined earlier. So I'm going to use the medium variable. And once you do that and reload, you'll see that the image is now rounded. All right, nice. For our next exercise, we're going to work on a cooler or a more challenging task, which is to make our image perfectly round. So yeah, check out step 9, and I'll give you guys a few minutes to work on making this image perfectly round. Feel free to use like the internet because this is a bit tricky, and I'll give you guys like 2 or 3 minutes to work on this. Do you guys need more time, or are you guys ready to go? Thumbs up if you guys are good. Okay, I'll walk through it right now. So, yeah. So to make this a perfect circle, we're going to work on modifying our image CSS file. So underneath our avatar, we're going to make the border radius to be half of our image width. So right now we're going to define our width to be 100%. And then we set our border radius to be half of that, so 50%. If you just reload, you'll see that we have now a perfectly round image, but it's not very nice looking because it's not a circle yet. So we're going to work on making that more visually appealing. So first, we're going to make sure that the top and bottom, or the left, the dimensions is a perfect circle instead of an oval. And one thing we can do is define aspect ratio to have a ratio of 1. And when you do this, you now have you have a ratio of 1 for your image, and now the circle is perfectly round. Wait. But we want to make this avatar to be centered nicely with some padding on the side. So to do so, we're going to first create a container around our entire avatar. So we define a div and create a class labeled as avatar container. We place this image inside, and now we define our avatar container to have some padding. So for padding, we're just going to make sure that the sides have take up some space. So for the top, we're going to define it to have 0 padding, so 0%. And for the left and right side, we're going to define it as 35%. So this means that the image will only take up like 30% of the entire width. So when we reload, you'll see that now the image is nicely centered and it only takes up a small section of the page. All right, nice. We're going to move on with the next step. So check out step 10, and yeah. Step 10 also has all the code for this perfectly round circle. So if you want to check it out, it's like underneath the CSS file as well. All right, so we're currently very close to finishing. But the last thing we had to do is format our text so that the About Me section and the fun fact is actually next to each other instead of stacked. So to do so, we're going to talk about Flexbox. So there's actually 2 ways of doing so, but the first version, or float, is now like outdated. So we're going to focus on using Flexbox. And Flexbox is essentially a flexible box that lets you control the direction, sizing, distribution, and more of your items. So you can align your items to have different widths and also like different order. So now we actually have a guide for you guys. So if you check out weblab.mit.edu/flex, this link brings you to a layout guide that talks about like every attribute about Flexbox. So for making our elements be next to each other, we're going to focus on flex direction. So right now, our flex direction is currently a column because it's stacked. But ideally, we want it to be next to each other. So to do so, we want to make sure the container have flex direction row. The thing with flex is that it's actually defined as a container, and each element inherits like a property underneath it. So first, we need to define the entire container of our sections. So to start off, we need to first create another div that wraps the entire section, both sections. So I'm going to define it as like section container. And to instantiate the flexbox, all we have to do is underneath section container in our CSS file, we label display to be flex. And now, because here, if you actually check out on flex direction, the default value is row. So if you just reload, you'll see that it's now officially next to each other. But if you want to like make a few modifications, like for example, if you want instead of it having about me be first and have like the cat go first, you can underneath like sections or your u-text center section, you can modify it to have row direction of flex direction of row reverse. So now if you reload, you'll see that, typo, I think. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. We're going to move on with the next step, and now we're going to finish off by spacing our two boxes. So we're going to check out step 11. What do you mean? All right, so now we're going to modify our flexbox to have equal spacing between our two left and right containers. And we're going to talk about flexbox, specifically the sizing attribute of it. So right now, if you look on our actual screen, they're not very nicely formatted. We want to have it have equal sizing of each element. So we're going to work on using flex grow. And flex grow essentially enables you to define like the default size of a flex item. So as an item underneath your flex box, you can define the default size for it. So all I have to do here is for these two sections, underneath it, I can define the flex grow to have size 1. And now if you reload, you see that the two elements are now nicely spaced in half. For example, as a modification, if you want like an element to have maybe like to be slightly larger than the other one, you can create two different classes for each of these two sections. So a quick modification I can do is like, if I label this as like text center 2, and then I create a class labeled text center 2, I can like modify the flex grow to here to only modify the sizing of the second container. So if flex grow equals 2 for the second container, now this element will take up twice the size of the first one. And here you'll see that the spacing is now a lot larger for the right side. Yeah, and you can make it also a lot larger. For example, if I do 4, like it keeps on pushing the left box to the left. Okay, we can also talk about flex spaces. And flex spaces is essentially another way of defining the default size of your element. And for example, if you want your basis to have some percentage value, you can do, like here, you can do like 50%, and this to be 50%. And now just evenly spaced in half. And if you want this to maybe be like very small, like 10%, you'll see that this value takes up 10%, this value will take up 50%, and you'll have some extra spacing at the very end. So yeah, these two, flex spaces and flex grow, are the two default ways, or the cleanest ways to modify like how you space your elements. And yeah, we provide this guide, weblab.mit/flex, for you to try and make the columns, or try to like modify your columns to be whatever you want. Yeah. Finally, yeah, we're gonna finish with the final step. So for this final step, we're gonna actually leave it off as homework. So yeah, congratulations, you guys finished your first workshop. And yeah, with HTML and CSS, it's like a very incremental process to learn. So hopefully this workshop gave you like the introductions that you need to maybe start building your own applications, and also introduce like a variety of topics for you guys to work on later on. And for some quick resources regarding Flex, use this guide if you want to refer to this guide whenever you need help. And these two games are also useful if you want to get better at Flex. All right, yeah. Yeah. So for homework, we have like this step 13 to be done. And essentially all you have to do is just clean up the code and focus on like styling it nicer. And for the final answers, you guys can check it out at workshop 0-complete. All right, and finally, for more like CSS information, we'll be talking more about it in the advanced CSS lecture next week. So make sure to check it out if you guys are interested to making your CSS applications look cooler. Okay, so that will be it for our workshop, and I'm going to leave it off to Sasha for the final section for today.